So what we're going to do right now is this. In order for you to have an enforceable contract, okay, what are the things has to be required? So we're going to look at two scenarios, and you're going to tell me who can enforce the contract against who. Okay, so let's look at the first example. We have Sally the seller orally agrees to sell the Yellowstone to Bob Buyer. Buyer sends a letter to seller which says, I confer we have agreed on the purchase and sale of Yellowstone, and I will pay you $5 million for it. And he signs it. Who can enforce the contract against who? Okay? Can Bob enforce it against Sally the seller? Can he do this, yes or no? You have to ask the question, who signed the contract? Whose signature is on the contract right now? It was a verbal contract in the first place, but he sends the letter and he says, I will buy the property for $5 million. Bob, and his signature. So that means Sally, can she enforce it against Bob? Yes, she can. You can always enforce the contract against the person who puts the signature on the contract, right? So the seller can sue Bob for specific performance if Bob does not continue with the contract because she has a proof of his signature saying that I will buy the property for $5 million. So if he doesn't continue, if he decides to get out, she can sue him, right? She can make him complete if she wants to, but the buyer cannot enforce it. Why he cannot enforce it? Because did Sally sign the contract? No, she did not. So that's why in reality, we need to make sure everything is legitimately done, make sure everything is in writing, and make sure the signatures are on the contract itself. Okay, example number 2. Sally orally agrees to sell the Yellowstone to Bob the buyer. Buyer sends a letter to the seller which says, I will confirm that I have agreed on the purchase price of the Yellowstone and I will pay you $5 million if he puts his signature on it. Okay, then the seller sends a reply saying, thank you for agreeing to buy my property for $5 million. Please forward the $5 million by Wednesday, and she signs it. Who can enforce the contract against who? Good, I hope you said both of them because both put the signatures. As long as they both put signatures, that means it's enforceable in 2 different ways. Okay, Bob can enforce it against Sally and Sally can enforce it against Bob. Good job. So now we're going to talk about our contracts. And of course, in order for the contracts to be enforceable, they must be signed, right? And they must be signed by the client who you're taking the listing from, or from the buyer itself. So we'll talk about those contracts. Honestly, I'm going to talk to our people and see if we can include this into your part number 3. So after you pass the exam, because this is such a good information for you, and I'm sure in real life, you'll have a hard time finding that information because nobody really teaches you, right? So for that applied course that you're going to be taking, this is a good information because that's what applied course is going to be all mainly is based out of, right? It's based on the contracts itself. Okay, so we have a listing contract and we have a contract of purchase and sale. So you have to know who is the part of the listing contract. Who are the parties to the listing contract? My first question is, you, as a real estate agent, are you part of any contract? How do I call you guys? We are the matchmakers. We match up them, right? We match up the office with the clients, right? And we get paid for that matching services. So just remember that the agent will never be part of any contracts. We will be a designated agent, but that doesn't mean we're part of the contract itself. And I'll show you that. So listing. Who is this contract is between? Who lists the house usually? Is the sellers, right? Seller says, look, I want to sell my house. Let's list it on the MLS system, right? Let's put it out there. So it's between the seller and it's between your brokerage. So yes, you're going to go meet up with the seller. Yes, you're going to sign a contract. You're going to help them to fill out the contract. But at the end of the day is the brokerage who will put that signature and the seller who puts the signature on the contract. Your signature, you can put it only as a witness, okay? You're not part of the contract. And that's kind of a good thing because if anything happens in between, is the seller who sees the brokerage, right? So listing agent, and the seller. So listing agent is going to be the person who represents this listing, right? This contract. So if you list the house, you become a listing agent, a designated listing agent. If you buy in the house for your client, that you are the selling agent. So please just watch how they phrase things like that. Because some people think if you're selling, they might think of this agent, but no. Selling is somebody who helps the buyer to buy the house, okay? So contract of purchase and sale, okay? It's the CPS. CPS is the short version of this. You'll see it all over our notes, right? Contract of purchase and sale. So now with this contract, now this is where you work with the buyer, and the buyer finds the house he likes, and he says, let's put an offer on this house, right? It's my contract of purchase and sale, right? So I want to purchase this house. So it's going to be between the buyer and the seller. Why is it between the buyer and the seller? Because the buyer gives an offer to who? He gives that offer to the seller and says, okay, seller, here's my offer to you. And then they deal between each other, right? So the signature will be between the buyers and the sellers. You will be as a witness if you need to be, right? And your name as an agent will be a selling agent because you're helping the buyer to buy and sell, right? So, and the purchaser, they use the word purchaser, and then that's a buyer, right? Seller, sometimes they call him a vendor. So just kind of get used to all different names in here. Okay. So can you collect the personal information? Yes, you can, as long as you get their client's consent, right? So as long as they let you collect it, that's okay, right? It's protected by the legislation. This protection requires licensee to obtain that informed consent form at every single time, no exceptions. Okay, so if you want to know what their legal rights, if they ask you any questions on what can I do, what I cannot do, you always send them back to their contracts. Everything will be expressed in the contract that is signed. So the seller, can he look at the contract of purchase and sale and see what are the terms and conditions that the buyer have in there? No. Can the buyer look at the listing contract? Why not? Of course, the buyer cannot look at the listing contract because that contract is between who? It's between the seller and it's between your brokerage. Is the buyer has anything to do with this contract? Of course not. So if your buyer asks you, says, can I just look at the listing contract before I put my offer? Right? You say, no, you can't because you're not part of this contract. So just know whose contract is it, like who you're dealing with. And if they want to know what their legal rights, if they want to see what are the terms and conditions, they can only look at their own contracts to know what type of terms they have in there. Okay, so we're going to look at the forms. So I'm going to explain you the forms, and I like this because it's visual and you can see a lot of things. We also have an attachment for you in this chapter where you can see those forms. You don't have to print them, but you can just visually see them. So this way, when I explain you, and if it's something is too not as clear, then you can look at those extra attachments that we have in the chapter for you. Okay, so what is the listing contract? A listing agreement is a contract between the vendor, which is the seller, and is between your brokerage, right? So I think that's pretty straightforward. So if you look at this, it says between Sammy the seller, okay? So you will get all the information from the seller. And if you look at it, it says, and RE/MAX Press Realty, so that's your brokerage that you're working for, right? And it's the brokerage address information. Do you see how your name does not show up in the contract in here? Good. Then we have the listing authority and the terms, right? I'll explain all this stuff, right? The property address, the deposit, the price, and all the other things in here. Okay, so the purchaser, which is the buyer, is not the party to this contract. Can he look at this contract? No, because he's not part of it. His name is not mentioned anywhere, so that's not his right to look at somebody else's contracts, right? Good job. Can you see real estate agent's name on the contract? You don't see it. Why? Because we are designated agents. So what does that mean, designated agents? That means they designated you to represent the seller, right, or the buyer. So they designate, so the office. So if you die, if you get hit by a car and you die tomorrow, and if it's you are the designated agent for this listing, the brokerage will say, okay, we'll designate it to somebody else out of our office. So that's kind of what they mean, right? So if they can always take you off and they put the other designated agent on there. Okay, good. So what is this designated agency? You see on the number 7, right? So in your contract, it's going to be on the point number 7. It says designated agency, right? And it will say subject to clause, blah, 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 and the listing brokerage designates, and they will put your name in there, right? So this is where your name appears saying that you will be that designated agent for that specific listing. If anything happens to you, they can take you off and they'll put a new agent in there instead of you, right? So under designated agency, while the contracting party is still the brokerage, right? The vendor, which is the seller, agrees that the brokerage will appoint one or more specific licensees to act on the vendor's sole agents, right? So on their behalf, basically. Okay, so every time when you advertise, you want to be sure that your brokerage in a permanent place, and if you have a team or whatever that is, you also want to put that in there, right? If you incorporate it too. So what type of information is required for the listing contract? So let's say a seller comes to you and says, look, I want you to sell my house. And you said, sure, no problem, let's do this. You pull up the listing contract, you start filling up the information. Should you ask if there is anybody else is on that title of that house, of that property? Is that one of the questions you should be asking? Yes, you have to, right? What if it's the client and his wife is on the title, but he comes by himself to you and says, I want to sell the house. Do you think that could be an issue here? It has to be. So basically, you have to pull out the title search. You have to ask how many people on the title, and if it's him and his wife, then how many signatures you're supposed to collect from this for this listing? 2. Right? So how many people on the title? That's how many signatures you have to collect. If it's only him who signs it, but the wife is not present, then you won't be able to list the house. Right? So that's how you have to think about it. Right? It has to be signed by all of the owners, and of course, the copy of the listing agreement has to be given to every single party to the listing contract. So if you have 2 sellers, that means you have to give them 2 copies, 1 copy each. Right? So that's something what they want you to know in the exam. We put this in red for you because sometimes on exam they will tell you, is it possible to find the contamination if it has to be disclosed on a listing contract? That's a totally different thing. So it's not going to be on the listing contract itself. It's usually done on the property disclosure statement, which we'll talk. It's a separate form, but it's not going to show on the listing contract itself. The listing contract is your terms between the brokerage and between the seller, right? For how long we're going to take the house for, how much we're going to sell it for, how much commission you're going to pay us, which I'll show you right now, right? But this, it's not part of it, right? Contamination is going to show up on a totally different form. It's called a property disclosure statement, PDS. Okay, so let's talk about different terms. So when you sign a listing contract, one of the things, of course, we always negotiate. And as I said earlier, right, negotiation, there's no standard commissions. We don't have a standard commission in British Columbia. You're not allowed to say, oh, it's just standard. You know, it's a normal rate. You're not allowed to say that because there's no maximum, there's no minimum. So when it comes to the commissions, you have to understand that, yes, you will add it and you specifically will show them how much is going to be your, right? How much is the total commission? How much is the buyer's commission? And how much is going to be your commission, right? And what happens when there's no buyer representation happens, right? So just to show you, right, total commission 7% on the first 100,000, 2.5 in the balance. That's kind of a usual, not a standard, but usual, right? Then you say the corporate brokerage, right? The listing brokerage will pay the corporate brokerage. So that means if the buyer comes with the selling agent, with his agent, you're going to give to the other agent, and that's just an example, right? 3.255, that's a usual split, but you can give whatever you want, right? On the first 100,000, 1.16 on the balance. Just to show you the examples. The more you're going to go towards the valley, if you go outside of Vancouver, you will see a lot of times they will put it as 3% flat, right? And then they will split it between 2 agents, 1.5 and 1.5, or it could be anything. So it's all up to negotiation. And as a client, if you're planning to hire a real estate agent yourself at some point, just know that you can always negotiate. There's no such a thing as a fixed commission rate, right? And then, of course, listing brokerage will retain, right, that much. And usually we keep a bit higher number than we give back to the buyer's agent, right? So 3.745 on the first 100,000 and 1.33. So you usually keep a little bit higher, right? And what happens if the buyer comes with no representation? Then we tell them that we're going to keep the full commission for ourselves, right? So that's kind of it's already stated inside of the contract. You just fill out this forms, right? You fill out the numbers in there for yourself. Next one, what else? What other terms do we have? Is that one of the terms to say how long you take the listing for? If it's a multiple listing, minimum is 3 months. You can't take it for less than that. Usually we take it for at least 6 months, a year. It's up to you to decide what you want to take it for, right? So that's the listing authority and the term for how long you take it for. Of course, one of the terms will be how much we're going to list the property for, right? The sale listing price. And of course, we have to collect the authority from the seller. We'll talk about the authority in the next chapter, right? Law of agency. So you'll see we talk about a lot of authorities, but the authority basically, you're allowed to collect the keys from the seller. You're allowed to do showings, right? So all of those authorities will show up stated like this in the contract, saying that yes, if the seller knows of any buyers, he has to let you know, so he doesn't do sell behind your back. So there's a lot of other things in here, like tons of terms, right? But that's something, the authorities that we asking the seller to provide us with, right? And it's already stated inside of the contract. Okay, question 12. A listing contract typically contains which of the following? The vendor's obligation to pay the commission. Is that one of the terms of the listing contract? Yes, it is. The scope of the authority of the agent. I just showed you that, yes, they have to give us the keys. Yes, we should have the rights to show the property. Price at which the vendor wishes to sell. Of course, it has to show up in the listing contract, and the length. So should be all of the above. Easy question, right? Okay. So can you rely on the seller's information? So the seller comes and say, hey, the house is 3,000 square foot. Okay. It has 2 acres and it has brand new roof. So they give you all that information. Can you add all that information into your listing? Because you're the one who fills out the listing agreement, and put it on the MLS and say, this is what the seller told me, and it comes with a brand new roof, 2 acres. Can you do that? Yes or no? You're not allowed to, because if you do that, you will be personally responsible for that information, right? So you might be personally responsible and people can come after you, right? So what you do with that information, if they say it comes with 2 acres, show me the survey. Show me the survey of the property, right? If they say brand new roof, do you have any receipts? So I can see and I can show that to the buyers, right? So that type of information, if they don't provide you with that information, just be careful what you state in there, right? Investigate information independently. You cannot say that the seller told me so, and because of that, I put it on my listing. You will be personally liable for this, so don't do that. Okay, question 13. When completing the listing contract, a licensee should rely on all of the information provided by the vendor. I don't think so. Only rely on the vendor's information if the vendor says he or she has checked it. Not enough. Independently check information with the appropriate authority where possible. No, that's exactly what they're aiming for. You have to know that you cannot rely on the seller's information. Okay, so offers. Let's talk about the offers. So if, let's say you list the house, and now you did some showings, and everybody wants to come and say, look, we're going to give you offers. Okay, so my question to you, so if you receive 5 offers, how many offers should you present to the seller? You receive 5 of them. Out of those 5, 2 of them are questionable. You know, they don't have deposits, they're too low. How many of those ones should you show to your seller? Please say 5. Because do you have the rights as an agent to make decisions on behalf of your seller? You have no rights. We are the matchmakers. We match them up. That's all we do. We don't make decisions on behalf of the sellers. We don't make decisions on behalf of the brokers. All we do is like a mediator in the middle, right? It's just kind of helping them, advising them, but we don't make decisions. So if they give you 5 offers, you present all of the offers, right? That is one of the questions they always going to test you in the exam. Make sure that you understand that. Okay, seller. What if out of those 5 offers, he doesn't like any of them? He doesn't like them. Does he have any obligation to accept any of them? No. Because how do we call a listing that we put on MLS? Is that an offer when you list the house on MLS? No, it's not. If you list the house on the newspaper or in the MLS system, whatever that is, it's called the invitation to treat. It's an exception to the offer. Previous chapter, right? So for that reason, he says, treat me with your offers. And if I like one of them, then I'll accept it. And if I don't like any of them, then I'll say, you know what? Off you go. Give me a better offer. Okay? So he's not obligated to accept any offers. Okay? Satisfaction of the terms of the listing agreement will likely trigger the payment of the commission of the seller. So what they're trying to say is this. Let's say the seller lists the house for $1 million. Okay? All cash. That's what he asked for. That was his conditions. And you list the house, and you got an offer for $1 million, all cash. But now the seller changed his mind. He says, you know what? Maybe I should sell it for more. I don't know. But you know what? I'm not going to accept this offer. And he says, you asked for $1 million all cash. I get to a buyer for $1 million all cash. Sure, you don't have to. But you might likely trigger my commission. You might probably pay my commission because I've done my job. In real life, we don't really usually do that because we like to keep the relationship going with those sellers. But if you don't care, if you don't want that relationship, that you can probably get the commission from him because you've done your job, right? You're never entitled for your commission. On the exam, please watch how they say how they phrase the sentences for you. If I say you will be entitled for your commission, it's a very strong statement, and you will recognize it because it is too strong. But if all 4 statements are strong, then you have to pick one, then you pick the better one, right? But just showing you that that's usually not the right statement because it's kind of too strong. If all of the terms are not met, of course, there's no commission is made. So if the seller asks for $1 million all cash, and the offer comes for $900,000 all cash, and if he refuses this offer, does he have to pay you anything? Of course not, right? So if not all of the terms are met, then of course he's not obligated for anything now, okay? And of course your job is to present all of the offers. It's not your choice, it's the seller's choice. Okay. So listing contract, there's not much to talk about it, just about the terms itself, but the contract of purchase and sale, we're going to spend so much time on this. And honestly, as I said, I hope we're going to add it to part number 3 because it will really help you out. And the next chapter about what we're going to talk about different forms, also we should add it to your part number 3. After you pass the exam, you should get all that information too. Okay, so a contract of purchase and sale. We call it the CPS. Every time you see the word CPS, you know that's the buyer's contract. Okay, so who are the parties to the contract in here? So look at the form in here. Is the contract who's buying and who's selling? Okay, so the 2 parties to the contract is always the buyer and the seller. So we have buyer, buyer. So if you have 3 buyers, 2 buyers, you will put each for every single line in here. Okay, you don't ever combine them. You have the address in here of the buyers, and then you have the seller's information, right? So now it's between the buyers and the seller. Okay, so we have that. Just remember that we are not part of the contracts ever. Right? We're just the real estate agents that's super happy for them, right? That's what we do. But we help them to fill out the contract. That's what we do. We match them up. Okay. So what are the necessary pieces of the information? We call them the 3 Ps. 3 Ps. Okay. The first P is those parties to the contract. Okay. So the first P is the parties to the contract. So it's between the buyer and between the seller. Okay. So that is the first P that you have to know. Next one, we have the property. That's the second P. So that is a must for you to have in the contract of purchase and sale. So basically the address. What are you trying to buy in here? Because if you don't put the property description or what you're planning to buy in here, of course, it's not a valid contract. And then the last one, what's the most important part of the contract of purchase and sale? If I was the seller and you give me an offer, what would I look for? The first thing I'm looking for, how much did you offer me? What is your price? So the 3 Ps that you have to know is the parties to the contract, the property, and the price. Now, out of those 3, do you see a deposit in here? Deposit, is that a mandatory term of the contract of purchase and sale? Deposit, is that mandatory? What if you were the seller, so you look at the buyer's name, you look at the property, you look at the purchase price, and then you say, it's a good purchase price, but he put 0 deposit. Is it still a valid contract then? Yes, it is. So in the previous chapter, we talked about this, deposit is just a good faith. So if somebody gives you offer with no deposit, maybe just put a family seal in there, my family name is on the line, then that could be enough, right? So just for the exam purposes, no, if there's no deposit, it's still a valid contract. Because deposit is just a good faith, and he can show the good faith in different ways. He can say, I'm gonna sell you my, I'll give you my paintings as towards not the deposit, but towards the, help me out, towards my good faith, right? So I can do that kind of thing. So basically, it could be anything in here. So deposit is not mandatory condition in there. Sometimes an exam they'll put in there for you. How about the commission? Does the commission show up on the contract of purchase and sale? Who pays the commission? Buyer doesn't pay the commission. Seller pays the commission. That's why the selling commissions will show up on a listing contract, not in the contract of purchase and sale. Okay, so just remember that buyers don't pay commissions to British Columbia. It's the seller who pays both commissions, the seller's commissions, right, and the buyer's agent's commissions. So statement of adjustment, something we're going to teach you in a separate chapter too. That's something the lawyers do before the completion date. Is that going to be part of the contract of purchase and sale? Of course not. It's a completely different form too. So just know what is, what's not going to be included in here. Definitely deposit doesn't have to be, right? And of course, there's no commission or statement of adjustments. Okay, so as I said, deposit is just a good faith, right? So contract is still binding, even though there is no deposit. We treat it as a condition, right? That's it. And indication of the purchaser good faith. And is not necessary for the formation of the contract. So you don't need to have that. So it's the same thing. Okay, we hold a deposit as a stakeholder. When you see the word stakeholder, just think of it as mutual party. So I'm not taking anybody's side. They just gave me a deposit. I'll take the deposit, put it in my brokerage, and that's all I do. Okay, question 14. Where the buyer makes an offer to purchase land and does not pay a deposit, okay, what happens then? Acceptance by the seller will not form a contract. Doesn't make sense. The licensee should personally pay $1 of his or her own money into the brokerage trust account. Nope. A contract will be formed on acceptance without existence of a deposit. That's what they want. And the offer is actually just an invitation to treat. No. So option 3 is what they're looking for. Question 15. When the purchaser under the standard contract of purchase and sale refuses to perform, and the lender will not have the following remedies. So let me just explain you what that means, refuses to perform. So just an example, so you kind of understand the process buying, right? So first you're going to put the contract of purchase and sale with your conditions. So this is when you put your offer and you add the conditions like subject to financing, inspection, the title search, whatever you want to check. So that's kind of a conditional agreement here, right? So then you go through negotiations, then the seller, if he accepts your offer, good for you, right? Then you're working on those conditions. The inspection, the title, whatever you need to do to get financing. And if you get all your financing, that's perfect, right? So then you remove your subjects. So you take them all out, says, I like everything, I'm satisfied, and I want to proceed, and I want to buy the property. And after you remove the subjects, this is when you're supposed to give that deposit to your brokerage, right? To your agent that you're working for. So you're working with you are the buyer, right? So you're going to work with the selling agent, and that selling agent will take the deposit to his brokerage as a stakeholder. You see what happens in here. And then we're all waiting for the completion date. Completion date is when they exchange the title for the money. What if, so back in the question, the buyer refuses to perform, so he does not want to complete. He already gave a deposit, but he doesn't want to complete. What happens now? What happens now? Okay? Option 1, specific. So which one is not a following remedy? So that means what the seller cannot do to that buyer. Specific performance is when they tell you what you can do, what you cannot do. So basically the judge say, hey, you're supposed to complete. That's your obligation here. You already removed the subject. So after you remove the subject as a buyer, you're obligated to complete. Otherwise, the seller will sue you for damages and he might enforce you into that contract, right? So seller definitely can ask for the specific performance. That means he's going to ask the buyer to complete it one way or the other. Damages for the loss of the bargain. Can the seller ask for those damages? Oh, definitely he can ask for that, right? And the damages relating to the cost of preparing necessary documents, he can ask for all of the damages and he can ask for the specific, but he cannot ask to hold that deposit. That deposit went where? That deposit is went to your brokerage. So the buyer working with his agent, the agent will take that deposit as a stakeholder. Remember, stakeholder, neutral. I'm not taking anybody's sides. And that brokerage will be also a stakeholder. So that means they're holding the money without taking anybody's sides in here. But those money will not go towards the seller. Okay? Those money, basically, if it goes through court, the judge will decide who gets how much out of that deposit. But here it says, they'll come up to deposit representing 50% of the purchase price as liquidated damage. No, it's not. The deposit does not belong to the seller at this point. Okay, the judge will decide how much the seller will get as a towards the damages. Okay. So what are the terms and conditions? So we talked about this before, right? So if I go back to the picture in here, so you put the conditions into your contract of purchase and sale, and usual conditions will be, okay, usual fire and property insurance, right? Make sure that you can obtain the fire insurance, because without the fire insurance, you're not going to receive mortgage, right? And if you're planning to get a mortgage, then they will ask for this. So that could be one of your conditions. Next one, the next subject is the mortgage to be available to you. So you're looking for that financing. Then we have inspection, that you want to do inspection in the property, make sure that you can come with the inspector and check everything out, make sure everything is in good order, right? And then we can do the title search, and then we can do property disclosure statement. So there's a lot of things that we can add, and it's up to the buyer to decide what subjects he wants to put in. This is just the standard conditions, right? So we call them subjects in real life: subject to financing, subject to inspection. But on the exam, they call them conditions, right? It's a conditional offer that you're providing with the seller. Okay, so this is where you have to understand those conditions, and I'm going to explain you what warranty is too, right? So two things we have to understand. So the condition, when you put that into your contract, says, here's my offer, here's my price, here's my deposit, if you put one, right? But I also want to make sure that I get pre-approved for this property, make sure that the bank likes this property and they will give me financing. And I also want to make sure that I look at the title search, make sure that I like everything that comes with this land, right? And the next one, you're going to put the condition to inspection, because you want to inspect the property, make sure everything is properly done. So the condition is a fundamental term of the contract, right? It's fundamental. So what does that mean? That means if you don't like the inspection, or if you did not get that mortgage, do you have to complete? Do you have to buy the property? Okay, let's go back to this picture, right? So it's been accepted with those conditions, and now you have the option as a buyer to remove them or not. You're the one who decides, do I want to remove those conditions or not? Right? So if the financing doesn't go through, of course you don't have to complete them, right? Or if your inspection doesn't go through, you don't have to complete on this. Good. So it is a fundamental term. If breach, you can terminate the contract. So conditional lets you terminate the contract. So if you don't like something, you can say, you know what, I'm walking away from this property, right? Sue for damages or specific performance. So again, as I said, as a seller, right, that's what they can do to you, right? But so this is an essential term, but the warranty is something that we add on top of things. So for example, let's say you are the buyer, you put the offer on the property, and the listing agent tells you that, or it states on the MLS listing that it comes with new roof, okay? So you said, it says that it comes with a new roof, but I want to make sure that we can add it as a warranty that the roof is new, okay? You can add it separately as a warranty. It says, I want to make sure that the roof, when I buy it, it will be new, for sure, okay? If you don't add that to the contract, then you cannot come up to the seller for that. But if you add it as a separate warranty and says, I just want to make sure you said that the roof is new, or you said that you're going to paint the house for me, I'll just add it inside of the contract. As a warranty here, it says that you're going to do that for me. So let's say you bought the property, completion happened, right? You move in the house, and then you check the roof, and then you check the paint, and says, you know what? He painted only the front of the house, but he haven't painted the back of the house. And the roof is only halfway done, okay? And you added those warranty, you put them into the contract. Can you walk away now? Can you cancel the whole entire purchase now just because of the warranty? You see, the warranty is a minor term. So it's basically, if it's breached, so if your seller did not paint the full house, if he did not fix the full roof, you cannot terminate the contract, but you can sue them for what? You can sue them for damages. Right? You see the point in here? So here you can walk away, because if you don't satisfy one of the conditions, you have the right to walk away. But the warranty is basically the seller gives you the warranty. If you state inside of the contract of purchase and sale, then you can come after the seller and sue him for damages, so he pays you for that. Okay, so that's why it's so important for you to add it into the contract, everything that you deal with. Okay, question 16. Which of the following statements about conditions and warranties is true? Only breaches of conditions allow the injured party to sue for damages. Is that true? Is it only the conditions that lets you sue people for money? Both of them you can sue for damages, okay? But only one you can terminate the contract with is the condition, okay? Not this one. Only breaches of condition allow the injured party to terminate the contract. The breach of the condition to terminate the contract. Okay, that sounds good. Option 3, only. You see how they all have only? So you see which one the best one. So option 2 so far is good. Only breaches of warranties allow the injured party to terminate. So warranty does not terminate, so that's out. And only breaches of the warranties allow the injured party to sue for damages, right? No, damages comes with both. So option 2 is the one that you want to choose in here, right? Only the breaches of the condition allow the injured party to terminate. So condition can terminate the contract. Let's talk about the doctrine of merger. Now, first of all, what is a doctrine? Doctrine is a principle of merging, of blending things, right? So it's like you're trying to get onto the highway, right? From the street, right? You're merging into highway. So that's kind of the same idea. So basically on a completion date. Completion date happens after you give a deposit, right? And then you're finally waiting to complete. When the lawyer is gonna transfer the title for the money, right? And as a buyer, you will put that title under your name and you finally can move in and, start enjoying the property, right? So on the completion date, this is when the doctrine of merger happens. This is when your contract merges with your deed. The deed is your legal document. In British Columbia, we call it the transfer form. This is where the form they use to transfer the title under the buyer's name, right? So that's kind of what happens. And it says, upon the completion of the contract of purchase and sale, the agreement and the parties' rights got merged, right? And they can no longer rely on the terms of any other contract preceding delivery of the deed. So basically, you cannot, what they're trying to say in English, that you cannot rely on any other terms of the contracts when it's already transferred, when the title is transferred under your name, right? When the deed is created, that's basically it. So I'll give you examples. I like explaining with stories because that's how I understand things better. But they say as a buyer, you better do investigations and make sure that you do appropriate work, right, when it comes to paperwork. And I'll show you how we protect the buyers from this doctrine of merger. We can protect ourselves. So the first example is when the tenant purchases the leased land. So the tenant is the one who purchases the land that he was previously renting. The lease which he had now merges into deed. So as soon as he bought it on the completion date, instead of having his lease agreement, now his name is on the title and now the property belongs to him. So what happens to his previous lease? The lease will be finished, right? So the lease disappears at law. So if he decides to create a new lease, he wishes to return to the property, he can do this, but he cannot assign the old lease since there's no more old lease that exists, right? So basically it cancels the original agreement and it creates the deed, right? That's your transfer, that's your name on the title, and basically you cannot come and sue the sellers for anything else that they promised you before. So that's what they're trying to tell you here, okay? Example number 2, that's when it comes to purchasers, right? When they complete on the closing date. So that's kind of applies to the real estate more when it comes to sales. It says the purchaser has an agreement of purchase and sale, which contains the conditions, the warranties, representation stuff. So this is our contracts when we include different things in there, right? The warranties that you're gonna pay in my house, right? I'm actually gonna give you a different story. Let's say you buy the house and you put as one of the conditions in there says that make sure that before the completion, the seller has to rezone the property so I can build my $6,000 square foot mansion, right? So you put that as a condition in there, and then you realize that before the completion, you realize that the seller did not get the rezoning approval. And now you say, so what do I do? Do I still buy the property though? Do I want to buy the property, right? You already gave a deposit, but now you said, look, you can't get me that rezoning and I can't build my 6,000 square foot home, so I don't want to buy it. So as a buyer, he can walk away still. And the seller says, but I don't want to give you the deposit back because you did not complete. And the buyer says, but you did not get me my rezoning. You see the problem is? So if they go to court, if it happens before the doctrine of merger happened, so before the title gets transferred to the buyer, then the court will likely give that deposit back to the buyer because one of the conditions were not met about rezoning, right? So the seller was supposed to rezone, he did not do this. So for that reason, the buyer could still kind of walk away. But if the doctrine of merger happened, so that means the buyer's name has already showed up on the title, that's it. After this, he cannot basically come after the seller. But I'll show you how we protect our buyers by putting specific clauses in the contract. But that's what they're trying to say. Upon the completion and receipt of the deed, this totalation of the deed is considered to be as a final bargain. The agreement is merges with the deed. So basically, all the agreements that we had previously, right, contract of purchase and sale, merges with deed, and that's it. When the buyer's name shows up on the title, he basically not supposed to come after the sellers now. So if he decides to complete and says, you know what, that's fine. I know that the seller did not get me the rezoning, but I still want to complete. If he completes, then he cannot come after that seller and says, you promised me you're going to do this, but you didn't do that, right? So anything previously noted on the agreement merges and does not survive the final closing. So this is an older type of system. This is created by the common law and saying after the doctrine of merger happens, when the buyer's name shows up on the title, then you're not supposed to come after anything else that you put as a condition of warranties on your previous contract, and you just have to rely on your deed, on your transfer form, and that's basically it, and you're not supposed to come after the seller. So that is an old system. So how do we protect our buyers from this? This is when we have the written warranty. So we have this section 18 in our contract of purchase and sale, and it says representation and warranties. There are no representation, warranties, guarantees, promises, or agreements other than those set out in this contract, and the representation contained in the property disclosure statements is incorporated into the forming part of this contract, all of which will survive the completion of the sale. Just because of this little clause in here, it says if you have some written warranties. And so what they say by this is this. So let's say the seller said it comes with a new roof, but he said it just on the MLS listing. So if you just pull up the MLS, it says comes with a brand new roof, but he did not add it into the contract of purchase and sale. So if it's not stated in here, if it's not mentioned, then you cannot sue them later for that. So that's what they say if it's incorporated into this contract, or if it's incorporated into the property disclosure form, which I'll show you right now, then you can come and make the sellers liable for all of those warranties and conditions that you added into this contract. So this is how we protect the buyers from the doctrine of merger, because doctrine of merger basically cancels everything out and says as soon as you're complete, you basically can't do nothing to the seller. But because of this clause, and if you add specifically, it says seller warrants that the roof will be brand new when I buy the property. If you put that into your contract, then after the completion, if the roof is not new, then you can come after the seller because of this clause in here. Do you see how nicely we protect the buyers from this, right? So that's what we have it. So written warranties, that's what they're referring to. Warranties are necessary to preserve the party's right to sue after the seller completes. So we allowed that little clause in here help us to save the buyers, right? So what is this property disclosure statements? Something that we like to incorporate inside of the contract of purchase and sale. It is a separate form. This is the form that when you're working with the seller, of course, the first form they fill out is a listing contract, right? That's where their contract with your brokerage, right? They sign everything, they agree on the commissions. And then the other form that is mandatory. Without this form, they cannot list the house. It's called the property disclosure form, PDS. You'll hear this quite often. This is not a protection to the seller. But without this form, we cannot list the house. Smart sellers, a lot of times, what they do, they cross things off because they don't want to be responsible for everything they say in there. I'm just teaching you little tricks in here, right? Especially if they don't live in the property. they always cross it off with an initial and saying, I don't know nothing about the property because I don't live in the property. But the property disclosure statements, if they answer all these questions about, are you aware of any existing tenancies, are you aware of anything underground oil storage tanks, service certificate available, all the things that basically you have to say yes, no, or no kind of thing, right? So they have to put initials in there. And as soon as they put their initials on this form, then be liable for this. And if buyer incorporates this property disclosure forms into his contract or purchase and sale, that becomes a written warranty from the seller saying, oh, there's no oil tank. And if later as a buyer you find there's an oil tank on the property, so guess what you can do? You can sue that seller and says, you put in the property disclosure that you guarantee that there's no oil tanks in the property. And now I found one and it cost me a lot of money to take it out. So you see what I mean? This is a protection to the buyer, not to the seller, but the sellers cannot list the house without this form, so they have to fill that out. Okay, so condition precedents. In real life, we call them subject clauses, right? Subject to financing, subject to inspection, subject to, right? So that's what we call it subject clauses. On the exam, we call them conditions. So subject clauses could be a condition precedent. Subject clause could be a condition subsequent. So the only difference is when do you remove this subject, right? So condition precedent, it's basically you have to do something, perform some act. So if you put subject to inspection, so that means you have to do inspection before the contract is binding. So if I look back at the picture, so you had your offer with your conditions, you negotiated, the offer got accepted, and now you have your time to remove your subjects, right? So you have conditions that you have to remove. So the condition precedents have to happen before you move on, before you want to satisfy them, right? So if you say, look, inspection, I'll do it. And if I like it, if everything goes through, then that's perfect. Then I'll continue. I'll remove the subject. So if I remove the subject, that means I'm going to move on to buy the property, right? So I'll be obligated to buy the property. I'll give the deposit and I'll complete on the property, right? So same thing with financing, right? Same thing. So buyer needs to get the financing, mortgage financings before committing to the purchase, right? So everything that you want to commit before, then that's your condition precedents. So in real life, you're going to deal with a lot of condition precedents, okay? But then we have the condition subsequent. So after the contract is formed, and condition which will discharge the principal obligations of the party to the contract. So it's not principal means the seller, it just means primary obligation of the parties of the contract. So let me show you what I mean by this. So we have this in your contract of purchase and sale, right? One of the clauses is deposit. They say deposit of, and whatever the amount you put in there, which will form the part of the purchase price, will be paid within 24 hours of the acceptance unless agreed upon follows. All monies paid pursuant to the section deposit will be paid in accordance with the section 10, blah, blah, blah.